Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call Ear to the Underground. This is where I put the spotlight on some underground bands who have released new music. Both these bands have a geographical connection to me that I will get into later as I talk about the bands. But the bands I'm featuring today are Cruel Bomb and Druid Lord. I will link in the descriptions down below both these bands' Bandcamp pages. You can click on those, go there. You can buy merchandise, physical copies. You can also pay for download digital copies if you want that, or other merchandise. So please check out their Bandcamp pages. I'm also going to be doing a Spotify podcast episode on these two bands where I will play 2 songs from each one of these bands for you to check out. If you are a Spotify listener, link for that down below. Okay, the first band I have today is Cruel Bomb and their recently released album, Man Made. This is an EP, 5 songs. They are from the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area of northeastern Pennsylvania. That's the area roughly around where I grew up. I went to college there. I met my wife there, so that's my connection to them there geographically. I like the inside of the disc here. It says NEPA Thrash Machine. That's really cool, and some pictures of their fans in here. This, I would say they are a cross between kind of old school thrash with some hardcore elements. The thrash that I hear in them is from sort of the classic Slayer, Seasons in the Abyss, Rain and Blood era of Slayer, maybe even some of the little bit earlier Slayer stuff, Hell Awaits and Show No Mercy, stuff like that. A little bit of Anthrax, maybe a touch of Megadeth here or there. The hardcore for me comes in more in the vocals, and with they sort of have the hardcore style vocals, the shouty, aggressive vocals. There's big gang vocals in the choruses, which I think is really cool. I'm going to admit I'm not the biggest hardcore fan, so it's hard for me to make references to who they might sound like from that. I hear it in the vocals. Maybe I hear a little bit of DRI in their sound also. So even with the hardcore, it's kind of more that old school when thrash was crossing over into hardcore, the way it's sort of the two blended together back then in the 80s. That's the way I hear this. The album is really well produced. The band is a trio. The guitar player is also the singer. The production on this is really, really great. You can hear all the instruments. It's really punchy. The drums sound really good. It's not an overly polished sound. It retains enough grittiness and aggression to fit this style of music. You can hear the bass, which is something that a lot of times in this type of music, the bass gets lost, but the bass is really present, so there's a nice bass guitar as well as a bass low end to the mix. So I really like that part of it. It's not real slick, but it works really well for this music. You can hear the double bass drum and everything with the drums, and it doesn't get overwhelmed. Too often with this type of stuff, when everything gets really busy, sometimes things get lost, but that's not the case here. And the vocals are real present, and these gang vocals work really well to sort of bring out the choruses in the songs. Okay, this is their second EP. They had an EP in 2019, I believe, and this is their most recent one. 5 songs, opens up with Keystone Mosh, which is a cool, short, mid-tempo intro thing. It reminds me a little bit of classic era Anthrax, a little bit, kind of a mid-tempo, chugging type, tight riffer. And then it goes into probably my favorite song on the record, Dogs of War. This is a heavy, fast Slayer riffing. Reminds me a little bit of War Ensemble. Just really aggressive, comes right out at you. There's a war theme to a lot of the songs on this record. It reminds me a little bit of, if I were to make another reference here, an old school thrash band, the band At War. They had sort of a similar vibe to them, very aggressive thrash with war themes throughout, and Cruel Bomb reminds me of them at times. But Dogs of War, the chorus of this is super catchy. I love here again the gang background vocals. When they kick in, it really just sort of makes the chorus jump out at you. And I love the line. I got to put my glasses on here so I read it properly. I didn't have the lyrics for it, so this is what I think he says here. I've got guns if you've got cash. Send your enemies away with one big blast. That's just great, man. So cool song just comes ripping out at you, and it flows really well after that sort of mid-tempo intro. Next is Bombed Squad. This one has kind of a more of a hardcore style metal riffing to it. It's really pummeling. It's really aggressive. It's got a cool tempo shift there where it sort of drops down into a half-speed riff, the big mosh part of the song. I've never seen these guys live, but if I can picture that when it would go into this is when the circle would get going. So I really like that part of the song. It reminds me of Anthrax, the way Anthrax would do that in their songs too. They'd have a fast riff and then, you know, the gear would shift into a half-tempo style riff. Stronger Than Yesterday has a great bass sound on it. I mentioned the bass earlier, being able to hear the bass, and I really like the bass sound in this one. It has a tight, punchy riff to it, big gang vocals, really cool. And the last song, A10, fast, aggressive riffing here again is sort of this war theme. You can just picture the airplanes coming in, dropping the bombs and everything, you know, just a blitzkrieg of sound. And it has a spot in the song which really reminds me of like a Megadeth style riff and kind of Peace Cells, like that era of Megadeth. Just really tight and really cool sounding. So this is a great band if you want sort of that old school thrash, hardcore crossover thing, but with some really great tight riffing a la Slayer, Megadeth. So really cool album. Make sure you check it out. Okay, the next band here is Druid Lord, and they are from not too far from where I currently live, Orlando, Florida. The name of their album is Relics of the Dead. It's released on Hell's Headbangers. You can check out their website. They have all kinds of great bands and releases. It's a great website to order stuff from. Druid Lord has had a couple albums out. I've seen them live a bunch of times, and they are a great doom death metal band. Now, when I say doom death, though, not in the style of the peaceful bands like My Dying Bride or Paradise Lost. Druid Lord doesn't have that gothic vibe to their sound. They are more just slow, crushing riffs. They evoke these images of horror and old horror movies, suspense, supernatural. Their album covers always have great artwork to them. This one, no exception. The album cover is super, super cool. Lots of slow, heavy, doomy riffing to it. One of the things that I really like, there's a lot of things I like about Druid Lord. One of my favorite things about Druid Lord is the vocals. And the vocals are handled by Tony Black, who also plays bass. And Tony has one of the complaints that for people who don't really get into death metal, maybe they're just traditional metal fans, classic metal fans, and they've never really gotten into death metal. People will often say it's the vocals. They can't get past the vocals. But Tony's vocals, you can hear and understand everything that he is saying, which is really great and works really well with this band in these songs, because a lot of the Druid Lord songs, and this is another thing I really like about Druid Lord, is that they tell stories, and it's almost like movies. And they also do this too. They have a lot of sound samples taken from horror movies. And so being able to understand what he's singing is very, very important, and it engages you in the songs. And he also has different things that he does with his voice. He just doesn't have one dimension to his voice. He's got the death metal growl thing, but he varies it up enough that it helps bring out certain sections of the song and helps give variety to the songs. That's the other thing that I like about Druid Lord in this album is that Druid Lord writes in kind of a traditional way, in the sense that there are choruses and hooks to these songs. There's choruses not only in the vocals that your ear can lock onto. There's also a lot of hooks and melodies from the guitars, like single note guitar lines that they play, and just from the riffing in general. And I lean more towards this style of death metal because I can get into the riffs more. You can hear what's going on with the riffs rather than when things are just fast all the time. It can sometimes feel like a blur. The production on this record is really good. I don't have a copy of this yet. I'm sure I will get it soon. I'll see these guys live, I'm sure, at some point in the future, and I'll get my copy. So I don't have any information on it. I know that Tony, the singer-bass player, he records stuff out of his garage, and he's had a lot of great recordings come out of there, not only from Druid Lord, but also from other local bands. So I'm not sure if they recorded it there. If they did, it sounds great. The guitars are super heavy and crushing. There's tons of bottom end. There's a nice spatial mix there. It isn't overly compressed or anything, so it's really just weighty and heavy the way it is produced, from the guitars to the drums. The drums sound great, so it's just a really well recorded album. Okay, it opens with the song Relics of the Dead, the title track. This has lots of cool riff changes in it. Another thing I really like about Druid Lord is just like one killer riff after another. Next is 13 Days of Death. This has a really neat atmospheric middle section to it with some spoken word parts that I'm guessing is lifted from a movie. And there's something in it that I'm not sure if it's a keyboard. I think it's a keyboard. At the beginning of Relics of the Dead, there's also like a keyboard sound that comes in at the beginning. That's another thing I like here too, is that they do add these different textures to the music. All right, another one I really liked is Mangled as the Hideous Feed. This is another really cool thing about Druid Lord. They have really cool, awesome song titles. Super heavy, slow section in the middle of this song, reverbed out like guitar lines where everything sort of drops down into a slow, heavy, crushing riff, and then there's these melodies from the guitar, but they're sort of pulled back to give it this atmosphere like it was recorded in a medieval church or something. Whatever it is, it's really cool, and it really works and adds to that sort of supernatural horror feel to a lot of the songs. All right, next, Nightside Conjuring is one that it's a short little acoustic guitar interlude thing that I think was really cool. It adds a little bit of a different texture to the album. I sort of wish they had incorporated a little bit more acoustic guitar stuff in this, because when I heard this, I was like, wow, this is really cool, and it adds a nice little different dimension to the sounds from these heavy down-tuned crushing guitars, and then you have these acoustic, almost classical style layered guitar thing here with this short instrumental. All right, my favorite song on the record is the song Monarch Macabre. Atmospheric intro to it, then these Candlemass like heavy doom metal riffs. I'm a huge Candlemass fan, so anytime anything gets in that world, I'm totally on board. There's these melodic, kind of regal, majestic sounding guitar lines that come in. There's keyboard lines that add a lot to the atmosphere of the song. This is just one that's super catchy. Again, you can understand the lyrics, so it draws me in. It makes me listen to and kind of want to follow along with the story, which I think is just great. So definitely my favorite song on the record here, Monarch Macabre. The album ends with Ethereal Decay, which is a short little instrumental, almost like a dungeon synth type vibe to it. So, okay, so there you go. There's Druid Lord from Orlando. Make sure you check out these two bands. Again, links to their Bandcamp pages down below. Druid Lord is on Hell's Head Bangers Records. You can also go to their website to get their stuff. Cruel Bomb is a self-released EP, I believe. So make sure you support these bands. Give them a listen. Listen to the Spotify podcast that I'm going to do, playing some songs from these bands. Support the underground. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.